What's up, guys? I'm Jeffrey Kunde, and welcome to this 5-day boot camp. I'm so stoked you're here. Today and for the next 5 days, we're going to be crushing what I think are the 5 most important topics when it comes to modern guitar playing, starting with today, music theory. Now, when I say music theory, you probably think, I've been avoiding this. I don't want to learn that. That sounds like math. That sounds hard. Today, what we're going to be doing is setting you up to be a more creative guitarist, a more creative and modern guitarist by learning what is modern music theory. This isn't boring music theory. This is just the music theory that you need to know as a modern creative guitarist who wants to write great riffs, who wants to play really cool chords, who wants to fit in great as a lead or rhythm player in your band. There's just a couple things you need to know as a modern guitarist when it comes to music theory, and that's what we're going to cover today in this short hour we have together. We're going to cram it all in, so I'm going to basically stop talking now and just go straight into modern music theory because you don't need any fluff. Here we go. We're starting with the guitar neck. Grab your guitar, grab a notepad and a paper if you want, a paper and pen if you want, and let's get going. Okay, starting with the note C. Jumping right in, let's go to the A string, 3rd fret. There is our note C. Now, if I'm going to go up the fretboard and play lots of notes, there are only 11 notes for me to choose from before I get to the next C on the fretboard. Moving up or down in between one C and the next C, which I'm sure you already know is called an octave, there are 11 notes between those two different Cs. We're going to go up the fretboard until we hit the next C note using the chromatic scale. So C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. Now, in between all the C's on the neck, I can play that same major scale and connect all those octaves using those 11 notes. From there, now let's talk about what is the smallest jump we can make in music. So the very smallest space between two notes is called a half step. If I were to move, looking at your screen right now, if I were to move from that C to the C sharp, so the first two bubbles you see on your screen, C to C sharp, that's called a half step. If I go to the E and go down one bubble, let's go down there. If I go to the E and go down one bubble to the E sharp or to the E flat or D sharp, that's down a half step. So up a half step is one bubble, down a half step is one bubble. It's the very smallest move that we can make in music or in music theory. If I want to make a jump from one bubble and skip a bubble and go to the next bubble, or from one note, skip a note to the next note, or up 2 frets, that's going to be called a whole step. So from the C, moving up 2 frets, I get up a whole step from C to D. If I go take any note, it doesn't even matter. Let's go to the G note. If I want to go down a whole step, looking at our screen, it looks like I can go from a G, skip that F sharp, and go land on the F. So that would be down a whole step. So up a whole step from C to C sharp. Down a whole step would be from, let's say, G to F, or from D down to C, or up a whole step would be C to D. Another way you can think of this on guitar playing is a whole step is 2 frets, a half step is 1 fret. So moving up the fretboard, if I just take my index finger and move up 1 fret, I'm moving up a half step. If I move up 2 frets, I'm moving up a whole step. Okay, now with those two simple terms, the half step and the whole step, and then of course our major scale, we can start to build what is the major scale, which is going to be our home base for everything you ever encounter as a modern musician. Pretty much everything from songs to chords to key signatures to major 7th chords to you name it. It all comes back down to this simple formula that I'm about to show you right now, called the major scale formula. And that is a ordering of whole steps and half steps put together on the fretboard using that chromatic scale. And that order goes like this. It goes, if you combine whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, in that order, starting on any note on your fretboard, you can get a major scale sound. A very familiar sound that you've heard. You've probably played major scales. You've probably played them in your guitar lessons before. You may never been taught what it is, how they're derived from the chromatic scale. Well, now you know. So here we have, again, our C to C octave using the chromatic scale, with the red notes are circled as the notes that we're pulling down using that major scale. So if I start from my C note and go up a whole step, I'll do it all in the same fret, or all in the same string, so it makes a more visual sense to you. So C, up a whole step to D, up another whole step to E, up another whole half step to F, whole step to G, up a whole step to A, up a whole step to B, up a half step to C. Very familiar do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, di, la scale sound, right? Everybody knows that one. You don't even have to know music to know that major scale sound, but that's how it's built. So I can start on any note of the chromatic scale. Let's go back to, let's say, like the note D. If I plug in my major scale formula starting on this note D, using this visual guide, I can say, all right, from D, we're going to go up a whole step. So we're going to skip 2 bubbles or skip 2 frets and go to the D to the E. We're going to go E to F, so whole step. E to F sharp, sorry. D, E, F sharp. So whole step, half step. We've gone 2 whole steps. From there, we're going to go from the F sharp to the G, because we went up a half step. G to A to our whole step. A to B to our another whole step. B to C sharp. C sharp to D. Start on any note in the chromatic scale or any note on your fretboard. Plug in that major scale formula and you get that note's major scale. Here we have it illustrated on a B flat note. So let's go there. If I find my B flat on the fretboard, it's going to be on the A string first fret. Here's a few B flats to choose from. Let's go down here, low on the neck. We're going to go B flat, up a whole step to C, up a whole step to D, up a half step to E flat, up a whole step to F, up a whole step to G, up a whole step to A, up a half step to B flat. So from there, now let's throw up 2 octaves of the major scale that we already pulled down from the chromatic scale right in the beginning, right? So once we get to our high octave C, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, if I go up the fretboard, I can continue that same whole step, half step pattern, or that same major scale. 2 octaves, same formula gets me 2 octaves of the major scale. From there, we can start to build our chords inside of a major scale. So now we're going to start to introduce the Nashville number system, which is basically we're going to number each of these notes of the scale. If I start with my first note of the scale, and instead of counting them with whole steps and half steps, I'm going to just count them with numbers. So starting on the first note of the scale, I'm going to say it out loud. First note, second note, third note, fourth note, fifth note, sixth note, seventh note, eighth note, or octave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So my first note of the scale is a C, my second note of the scale is a D, my third note of the scale is an E, and so on and so forth. Now, each one of those notes, each one of those numbers actually represent a chord that belongs in the major scale, or a chord that belongs in that major scale's key signature. So right now we just played the C major scale, which is the DNA, or the foundation of the key signature of C major. Believe it or not, when I'm playing a song in the key signature of C major, there's only 7 notes that I'm playing. When Britney Spears wrote a song in the key of C major, she sang only 7 notes. All the band members were only allowed to play 7 notes when it came to building chords inside of that key signature. There's only 7 notes possible if you stick within the major key signature. Now, later on, you'll probably learn how to break that rule, how to play notes outside of the key signature. We'll even touch on that towards the end of this hour together. But for right now, that's all you need to know, is that there's only 7 notes you can choose from, and they are those 7 notes that are in the major scale of the key signature. So right now we're in the key of C. We just defined what a C major scale is. If I said we're in the key of D major, you would know, well, those notes are that I'm allowed to play, that I'm allowed to write my solo, that I'm allowed to play my chords. Those notes are going to be derived from the D major scale. Major scale, key signature of D, those are synonymous. They have the same definition. The notes in the key of C major are the same as the notes of the C major scale. So now we can start to build our chords inside of the key signature of C major. Let's go to the 1 chord, which is going to be built from the first note of the scale, the C chord. Now, building chords inside of a key signature is super easy. All we have to do is start on 1 note, skip the next note of the scale, and add the next note. So we're going to add 3 notes for every chord that we're going to build in the key signature of C major. Right now we're going to build the 1 chord, or the chord that's built on the first note of the scale, the C major chord. We're going to start with the note C. We're going to skip the note D, and we're going to add in the note E. Okay. Now we're going to add 1 more note. We're going to go from 1 to 3. We're going to skip the next note, the 4. We're going to add in the 5. So 1, skip the next note, add the next note, skip the next note, add the next note. 1, 3, 5 gives us our first chord, our 1 chord in the key of C major, C, E, and G. play that C shape on my guitar fretboard, I'm actually only playing C's, E's, and G's. So there's an E right there, there's a C right there, there's an E right there, there's a G right there, there's a C right there, and there's an E up on top. Cool, right? Let's move on. Let's go to the next note of the scale, the D note. Now we're going to follow the same sort of system where we're just starting on one note of the scale, we're skipping the next one, we're adding in the next one, we're skipping the next one, we're adding in the next one. Super easy, drawing lines between these bubbles of the major scale to connect our notes and create chords in the key signature of C major. So this is called the 2 chord because it's built on the second note of the scale. Let's go to the second note of the scale, this D. We're going to play the D, we're going to skip the E, we're going to play the F, we're going to skip the G, and we're going to play the A. D, F, and A gives us our D chord, or our 2 chord, in the key of C major. Now this is a different sounding chord than the first one, right? There was our first chord, our C major chord. Now our D chord has a minor sound to it. And that's because the distance between the D and the F, even though it looks the same as the distance between the C and the E, is actually shorter in this case than it was with the 1 chord. The 1 chord from the C to the E, let's go back to our chromatic scale, was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total bubbles, right? From C to E was 5 total bubbles, including counting the first one, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, and E. Now if I go from D to F, I'm going to count D, D sharp, E, and F. That's going to be 4 total bubbles. So the distance, because of our formula of whole steps and half steps, it's not always going to be exactly the same amount of half steps between each of these chords that we're building. So D, let's see, where was it? It was from C to E, looks the same in this diagram as E to G, as D to F, F to A. But when you pull up that chromatic scale, some of these distances are going to be shorter and longer, and that's what's called a major third versus a minor third, which we'll get to in a bit. For now, let's just keep building and stacking these bubbles to get through our entire chords of the key signature of C major. So moving on, now we go to the 3rd note of the scale, the E. So let's go up to the E. So now we're going to build a chord off of the 3rd note of the C major scale. E, skip the F, add the G, skip the A, add the B. Okay, so we had our first chord, our second chord, a minor chord, our 3rd chord, E, G, and B. Okay, moving on, we have our 4 chord starting on the 4th note of the scale. F, skip the G, add the A, skip the B, add the C. F, A, C. Moving on, let's go to our 5th note of the scale, the 5 chord. So building the 5 chord, we're going to go to 5, 7, and look, now we have to pass the octave and go to the 2. Or you could also say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the ninth note. Either the ninth or the second. Doesn't matter however you want to think of it, but basically we're just going to keep skipping bubbles, right, to build our chords. Or these are actually called triads. Doesn't matter. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's our fifth note of the scale, the G note. We're going to go G, B, D. So when I play a G chord, it's built of G's, B's, and D's, and that's it. Here's a G, here's a B, here's a D, here's a G, here's a B, here's a D, and here's another G. Moving on, now let's go to our sixth note of the scale, the A note. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Skipping bubbles again, we're going to go A, C, and E. In my A-shaped chord that I know how to play, that you know how to play on the guitar, it's built of A's and C's and E's, and that's it. Even though some of them are repeated, it's still the DNA of that chord was built from the chromatic scale, then pulling down the major scale, then skipping bubbles, like we're showing you, starting on the sixth note of the scale. So that's how music theory relates to the chords that you already know low down on the neck. When you're in the key signature of C major, and you're playing all these chords, all those chords are built from the major scale, from the natural number system of this system of just starting on a note, skipping the next, adding the next, skipping the next, adding the next, which really makes it super easy. When I want to play in a different key, now it becomes really easy. All I have to do is go to any note that I want on the guitar fretboard. So let's say we're going to go back to that key signature of B flat. I'm in the key of B flat. I'm going to plug in my major scale formula. Now from there, from my B flat, I can build my one chord, right? My first chord of the key signature of B flat is going to be the one chord, or the B flat major chord. And how do I get my notes from that chord? Well, it's easy. I start with my B flat. I skip my C, I add in my D, I skip my E flat, and I add in my F. So B flat, D, and F give me the notes of my B flat major chord. So if I were to quiz you and say, play the 5 chord in the key signature of B flat, you could, with some trial and error, with some thought process, which hopefully you don't have to do later, but just starting out, you would think, okay, what's the 5th note of the B flat major scale? We would go from B flat up to B flat, C, D, E flat, F. B flat, C, D, E flat, and F. So the 5th note of the scale is our F chord. B flat, D, E flat, B flat, C, D, E flat, F. Now on the F, we're going to build our 5 chord. So that goes F to A to C, or F here, A here, and then if I were to continue the octave, we would add in the C on top of that. So okay, now let's build our final chord of this key signature of C major, called the 7th chord. This seventh chord is not often not often used in modern music, but let's build it anyway just for you to hear it. So let's go to our seventh note of the scale. It's the B note. Now we're going to do the same process again. We're going to build it from using our jump method. We're going to start on the B, jump away from the note C and land on the note D. Skip the note E and land on the note F. From B to D, and from D to F, put those notes together. It's called a diminished chord. Why is it called a diminished chord? It's because it's actually built on intervals of minor thirds only, which we'll get to in a little bit. We haven't covered that yet, so just hold on to that thought. It's a diminished chord that you're not going to really be using except if you're playing jazz or classical music, which I imagine most of you aren't really dabbling a whole lot in yet. If you are, then awesome. That's what a diminished chord is. That's how to build it inside of a key signature. Let's move on though and come back to that in a little bit. So now inversions. When I go back to, let's say, my note C, my chord of C major, where's that? Let's go to here. So here's my C major chord of C's, E's, and G's. Anytime I play a C major chord, it's always going to be of the notes C, E, and G, no matter the order that I play them in. So on the guitar neck, when I play this standard form of a C major chord, I'm actually playing it with a low E on the bottom. So the note C isn't the lowest note that my ear is hearing. The lowest note my ear is hearing is the note E. Anytime I'm playing not the first note of the chord as the lowest note of the audible, what I'm hearing in my ear, so for instance in this low C chord, the lowest note audibly heard is a note E instead of the note C. It's called an inversion. It's basically taking the chord and flipping it somehow. It's stacking a different note onto the bottom of the chord to give it a different sound or a different feel. So that's better shown if I just leave out this low E note. So I'm going to now strum this chord without the low E. Now it's what I would call a first position or a root position C major chord. Root position meaning the lowest note of the chord is a C. If I'm going to change that low note, I can change it to either two options, right? I have an E to choose from or a G to choose from. I can either put the E on the bottom or I can put the G on the bottom. To still be a G chord, I have to use one of those two notes. Or sorry, to still be a C chord, I have to use one of those two notes. So now I can put the G on the bottom. So I have three different sounding C chords now. I have a C in root position. I have a C with a E note on the bottom. And I have a C with a G note on the bottom. Technically, those are called root, first inversion, and second inversion. First inversion is going to be when I have the middle note of the chord as the lowest note. So in this case, it would be a C with E on the bottom, called a first inversion C major chord, or a second inversion C major chord, which is when I have the second note of the C major chord, or the fifth away from the first note, right? So in this case, it would be the fifth note of the scale. The G on the bottom is going to be called our second inversion C major chord. Let's go to the chord G, just to mix it up. So let's go over here. Playing our G chord, we have inside of our G chord our G, B, and D. We built that chord, I think it was right here. No, it was here. G, B, and D. It was our 5 chord of the key of C major, G, B, and D. Now if I want to invert that chord and put the B on the bottom or the D on the bottom, I can. I can do that in any way that I want to on the guitar neck, but it's going to have a slightly different name. And that in this case is going to be called a first inversion G major chord, where I have the B on the bottom. So instead of this chord, I'm going to put the B on the bottom and leave out this low G note. If I want to put the D on the bottom, it's going to be called, again, a second inversion chord, like we did with the C chord. Second inversion G major chord, first inversion G major chord, root position G major chord. Now watch this, I'm going to do that up the guitar neck in a few different ways. So let's go to a bar-shaped G major chord. So I have right here, we have 1, we have our 5, and we have our 1. I'm going to go to our 5 now, and all I have to do to build a G major chord is to stack either G's, B's, and D's, as many as I want, as many as I can put under my fingers to get a G major chord. As long as I keep that B note in the bass, this is still going to be a second inversion G major chord. There's a G major chord in second inversion. And the way that I got there was just by stacking G's, B's, and D's together. I can build lots of ways of playing the G major chord up the fretboard using music theory. This is why modern music theory is so powerful, because if I know how a chord is built and I know that it's only 3 notes, then on the fretboard I can do that however I want and create brand new chords and create in turn brand new music. It's pretty sick. Okay, now that we've defined how to build chords inside of a key signature, basically by using the major scale and jumping bubbles, right? We've gone over that plenty of times now. Now let's talk about briefly the topic of intervals, because this is going to play into building expanded chords, which you're going to need to know eventually. So when we built that diminished chord, that 7th chord, it sounded really funny, right? And that's because we did what was called stacking minor thirds instead of stacking either a major third and a minor third, or a minor third and a major third. When I say the term major third or minor third, minor second, major second, that term is referring to an interval. An interval is loosely or basically defined as moving from one note to the next note, and it's defining that space. So how far am I moving from one note to the next note? In the chromatic scale, like you see up here, we have a chromatic scale of G up to F. So, and every note in between, right? And so right now our C is circled. And if I'm going to go up the distance of 1, 2, 3, 4 notes, or 4 bubbles, 1, 2, 3, 4, that gets me a major third sound. I'm going to skip all these notes and jump up to the E. Major third. Now the same thing and go to the E flat instead of the E, that's called a minor third. So C to E is a major third, C to E flat or D sharp is a minor third. Two very different sounds, almost the same exact term. Same thing can happen if I move down a note. So C down to the A flat would be a major third. C down to the A minor third. Major third, minor third, major third, minor third, or up. Major third, minor third, major third, minor third. Okay, now let's go back to building our chords. So let's go to like just a straight up chromatic scale. If I go C to E to G, that's going to build my C major chord, right? In this view, it looks like I'm building, where is it? Here. I'm building just stacking thirds that all look exactly the same distance apart. But because of these W's and H's, that means that the distance between the E to the G is actually a shorter distance than the distance from the C to the E, right? Because from C, D, E, we have a whole step in between each of those notes. From E to G, we have a half step and a whole step. Half steps are shorter than whole steps. So back to our chromatic scale, C, E, and G is a whole step and then a half step. Or sorry, a major third and then a minor third. C sharp, D, D sharp, E in between our C and E, F, F sharp, G, and A, G sharp in between our, F and F sharp in between our E and our G. So there's 3 notes in between our first jump and 2 notes in between our second jump. The first note took a longer distance than the second jump. A major chord is always built from stacking a major third and then a minor third on top of it. A minor chord is the opposite. It's always built from stacking a minor chord, or a minor third and then a major third on top of that. So that brings us to our final point of the natural number system, which is when we're building our chords inside of the natural number system, we're always going to end up with the same major or minor sounding chords, no matter what note that we're starting on in the major scale. So our 1 chord is always going to be a major chord because of this formula, whole steps and half steps. C, E, and G gives us a major chord because of the distance between the C to the E and the E to the G. Our 2 chord is always going to be a minor chord because of the distance between the D to the F and the F to the A. D to the F is a whole step and a half step. F to the A is a whole step and a whole step. It's a minor third stacked then on top of a major third. With the major chord, it was a major third stacked below a minor third. So when we get to the 3 chord, you can see that we have the same sort of situation where we have a half step and a whole step in between our first 2 jumps, the E to the G, and then a whole step and a whole step from the G to the B, giving us that minor third, stacking then a major third on top of that. So the 3rd note of the scale always builds a minor chord. The 2nd note of the scale always builds a minor chord. The 1st note of the scale always builds a major chord. And this has to do with that major scale formula that we defined at the beginning of this lesson. When we go to the 4 chord, F to A to C, we have a whole step in between that two whole steps in between that first jump, right? F to A gives us a whole, and then the A. When we go A to C, we have a whole and then a half. So a whole step and then a half step in between that second jump, giving us a major third stacking a minor third on top of that major third. So the 4 chord is always a major chord. The 5 chord, same exact situation, whole step on whole step between the G and the B. So we know it's going to be a major chord. And then the B to the D is a half step and a whole step, giving us that half and whole combination, our minor third. So G, B, and D is a major chord. A major third and a minor third together, first a major third and then a minor third, gives us a major chord. A minor third and then a major third gives us a minor chord. So the 1 chord is always major, the 2 chord is always minor, the 3 chord is always minor, the 4 chord is always major, the 5 chord is always major, and the 6 chord is always minor. That's the basis of the natural number system, and why it makes it so easy to transpose between different key signatures is because as long as I know my major scale, as long as I know how to plug in that formula into any note on the scale or on the fretboard, I can build chords from that major scale. And I get exactly the same chord quality no matter what note I start on. It doesn't even matter. So I had the 1 chord, our major chord, 2 chord, minor chord, 3 chord, minor chord, 4 chord, major chord, 5 chord, major chord, 6 chord, minor chord. Let's try it on a different note. Let's go to the F sharp. Major chord, minor chord, minor chord. So we're on our 3 right now, right? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're on our 4th note of the scale. Major. I'm just stacking thirds like I showed you how to do. We're starting on one bubble, skipping the next, adding the next, skipping the next, adding the next. There's our 4 chord. 5 chord. 6 chord. Now, why aren't we using that 7th chord? It's because when we get to the 7th chord, it's a half step and a half step stacked on top of each other, or a minor third, it's a whole step and a half step for the first jump, giving us a minor third, and then a whole step and a half step for the next jump, giving us another minor third. Very diminished sounding ugly chord. Okay, so now you know how to build chords inside of a key signature, and you know how to number those chords inside of a key signature. So what should you do from here? From here, you should practice your major scales on the fretboard, and you should practice building those chords using this visualization tool that I've given you. If you can start to imagine that jump of whole steps and half steps put together, that stacking of thirds, then this whole system starts to make more sense and starts to click for you. So I hope that was helpful for you. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, this is going to save your life when it comes to being an incredible modern musician. This is all the music theory that you need to know. I'm sure you'll have to rewatch this video a few times for it to click in, but lucky for you, you own it. So go ahead, rewatch it, use your notepad and paper, try and apply it to the neck, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 2 of this boot camp. Peace.